What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Crypto Creamers, and I'm here with another Bitcoiner, Yves Bennaim. How you doing, man? All the way in Switzerland.
I'm very, very good. I don't know where you are, but it seems like it's still daytime there, so it's good. I'm good.
Yeah, so I'm based in Florida, so like we're kind of on the other side of the planet, but man, the magic of the internet, right?
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's perfect.
Awesome. So, we ran into each other accidentally. I'm going to start off the podcast with this, because it was just the story of how I
you insulted me.
Yeah, I basically insulted you.
It started by you demeaning my talent.
Absolutely. That's actually incredibly true. And let me pull it up so everyone understands what he's talking about. But Yves is actually pretty famous. I think that people don't understand how famous he is, which is the reason that I wanted to bring him on the podcast in the first place. So let me bring it up. So here is me being an idiot and basically, giving his beautiful piece of art, which I have right here, by the way. It's incredible. This beautiful piece of art, I gave credit to the people over at Cold Card, and I was correctly, corrected that Zook was the actual designer. So that's really cool, man. This is an awesome design. And I just wanted to have you on the podcast so everyone wouldn't make that same mistake that I did. So I just have a question for you. How does it feel? Did you have any idea that this logo was going to blow up the way it did?
No, originally the idea was to make something that was more like hidden and stealth. The original thread started by, I forgot who started it, but someone was talking about the idea of carrying the Bitcoin logo all the time. How it's really not Opsec friendly, and I thought about this historical movement of Christians. You know, that fish that you see sometimes at the back of cars. Originally, it was a way to signify that you were a Christian without using the cross, and it was very useful when people were being persecuted. To recognize each other, but at the same time not use a sign that other people would recognize. And so I thought, maybe we need that kind of, the name is Ictus. Maybe we need an Ictus for the honey badger so that people can carry a Bitcoin recognizable sign for other Bitcoiners, but not recognizable for, I don't know, customs official or the $5 wrench kind of people. Yes, and so I proposed that sign. Adam Back said the Suze logo, or Suze, that chameleon was kind of cool. So it gave me the idea of like simplify the honey badger as much as possible and to make it like a little cute character that if you don't know what it is, you have just no idea.
Absolutely. And that's so cool that you bring up the old Christian references, because I remember seeing that when I went to Rome and I saw the early, I would say like the early Christian graves and how they would differentiate themselves from, the Roman religion is they would put a fish on their graves. Yeah. And the tour guide would say, look, these are early Christians and it's because of the fish. So that's so cool that this actually has a name, right? So it's like, and it's, for people that understand Bitcoin, they see this and they immediately understand that guy's a Bitcoiner but if they're not in the community, they don't understand the reference whatsoever. So that's really cool, man. It's really interesting. How does it feel that I'm holding your art? Basically,
no, it's fantastic. What CryptoCloaks did is it's quite amazing to see something 3D when originally it was just like a doodle.
Absolutely. And it's being used by Cold Card, it's being used by CryptoCloaks, and I'm sure that this design is going to be a staple. I'm sure that we're going to see this more and more often. And of course, it's open source, so anyone could just take it from your
exactly.
and make it their own, whether they want to make a t-shirt or a sticker or whatever it is that you want to do, you could just take that design. But it's really cool, and I really appreciate that as a Bitcoiner that you contributed something. It seems so simple at the moment, but it's really not. So thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. So getting into it, so I saw also on your Twitter when I was checking it out after, I made that horrible mistake that you got into Bitcoin in 2011. Man, that makes you an OG, right? So could you kind of...
It depends. It depends if you're considering people who actually adopted, as in bought or mined, or people who got into the rabbit hole. I fell into the rabbit hole, but it took me 2 years to actually act on it.
Yeah, so I think that everyone has a very similar story because I actually used Bitcoin 2 years, like in 2014, 2013. Like I used it to transact, right? I didn't use it to save or to hodl, right? I used it as a currency. Um, but then 2 years later, I got full time into crypto. I apologize, my hair is acting crazy
No,
today.
no worries. I don't have that kind of problem.
So yeah, so the 2011, the 2011, 2012, 2013, 2013 is very, very, still very early. Could you explain, because I think people forget, could you explain how different the Bitcoin landscape was back then, and how much uncertainty and how much we didn't know what the hell it was back then compared to now?
So, okay, I'm gonna humble brag, but in reality, I feel that I'm not an OG because the OGs were the ones who didn't have any value to me. Like when I started being interested, there was what's his name, Gavin's Fawcett was giving 5 Bitcoin at the time. Either it was still giving 5 or it was giving 1. But however it is, it's just completely crazy when you think about it today, right? Back in the
Absolutely.
days, you would go into Reddit. It wasn't that noisy on Twitter, but in Reddit, the our Bitcoin was growing and very friendly because it was super nerdy at the time. Um, and you would just go and say, "Hey, I like Bitcoin. I'm interested," and people would send you stuff. There was absolutely there was no scamming. There was nothing because there was basically no value. Um, the moment when I started being interested was when Gawker published their article about Silk Road.
Hmm.
And at that time, of course, it had value because people were still, I mean, they were on Silk Road, they were buying stuff, but the value was um, it was very anecdotal. It was, I don't remember, but like, you know, 1 gram of whatever would cost
Hmm.
20,000 Bitcoin or something like that, something completely ridiculous. And but I wasn't there, for example. I wasn't involved. I wasn't there. I wasn't aware when what's their name? WikiLeaks got canceled by PayPal, and Satoshi was still in the forums and everything. I wasn't there for Bitcoin forum. I was there for Reddit. If it means something in terms of eras, and 2013 was the moment when things started becoming more accessible. Because in the middle you would have Shrem going to prison, Coinbase starting, but they don't know if they're going to go to prison as well. You had to go to like Second Life, buy some Linden dollars with so forth, and then you would exchange them for something else. It was really weird. It was really crazy. 2013 is Mt. Gox. So Mt. Gox was really, to me, a very pivotal time when it was super easy. Suddenly, it was very accessible for people who were not OGs, who were not miners, who didn't, started with CPU and then moved to GPU and so on and so forth. You could just be a normal dude like me and say, I want to get involved. I want to get inside that thing and actually see how it works. But back in the days, there was no SPV wallet. There was no wallet. If you wanted to have a wallet, you had to either run Bitcoin QT on your computer, which was super scary because you didn't know what was happening, and it was
Hmm.
downloading the blockchain and everything. And a lot of people are on laptops, so like you start it 2 seconds later, you have your fans going like super fast. Or you had to use something like kind of hosted, but not really. You had like different options, and that's when a lot of people started using blockchain.info, because that was the only wallet that made sense. It wasn't completely custodial, but at the same time, you were not too afraid to do something completely stupid and be in the newspaper with your hard drive that exploded and you didn't do a backup and things like that.
I got it. So
But back in the days, I don't know if you remember, there were people who were breaking or like pretending to break their iPhone because Apple was saying we're banning all kinds of Bitcoin related apps, including wallets. I don't know if you remember, there were like a couple that actually got kicked out from the App Store, and people were so pissed off. And that was a time when we thought, okay, it's going to be like super rebellious or not. And then, a couple of years later, you had wallets all over, and bread wallets started, and so on.
absolutely, but it's so crazy to hear these stories, right? Because I got in, it wasn't as set up how it is today, right?
Oh no, it was adventurous.
It wasn't set up as it is today. I remember downloading exactly what you said, the lightweight client of blockchain.info, that you didn't have to download the whole blockchain. So that allowed a lot of people, if you didn't want to download the whole program, to use it for sure. And I remember that was the first wallet that I used, but I used it for a transaction. I never used it to save. And then, once I started growing older and wiser and an opportunity popped up for me, to go into crypto, as a minor, I started learning all these things. And I just want to go back to that idea of resilience, right? Because you said that Apple, one of the biggest companies in the world, has a $1.5 trillion market cap. By the way, that market cap is bigger than the GDP of most countries around the world.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Just to give you a
I
reference.
think, I think, but don't quote me on it. I think they have more money than Craig Wright, but I think it's like just or something. They just overtook him. I'm not sure.
That's savage. I like it. I like it. So that I love that, that story of the underdog, because that's what I see Eat Bitcoin is. And I think that, it is this underdog going against this huge behemoth of the financial system that's been around for so long. So the honey badger is this perfect reference to Bitcoin, because it doesn't die. And I don't know if anyone remembers that original YouTube video, but that's where it comes from.
Of course. And there is this expression from Taleb that people have been using with Bitcoin. It's anti-fragile. It's actually building itself stronger every time there is something that breaks in it. You have one person going to prison, let's say whatever his name is, Ulbricht, and 2 seconds later you have like 2 or 3 different Silk Roads starting. You have something that is completely illegal, and someone gets 2 life sentences, and a year later you have major companies, or 2 years later, whatever, major companies starting to say it's not so bad. We're interested and we want to see where it goes. I mean, we're not at the stage yet where Bitcoin is directly included in your iPhone's default apps, right? We're not there yet, but what's the name? Is it HTC or Huawei?
It's Samsung. Samsung comes
Or
with
Samsung? Yeah, it was
Samsung
Samsung.
comes with
Yeah,
a crypto wallet for sure.
and the idea of this happening just after someone got 2 life sentences and got everything confiscated, and it's so strange, because every time there is a step forward, there is one thing broken, 2 things stronger or solidified.
Absolutely. And I think that's so important, right? This aspect of Bitcoin that it's just so freaking resilient that, you know, and there's so many examples like the Bitcoin Cash fork, you know, they're wanting to increase the block size, and then the nodes, you know, the people, the plebs, right, spoke up and we said, no, fuck that, right? You know, governments. And that kind of segues into my next Apple, another example, that kind of segues into my next question, which is, why do you think the Swiss government has reacted differently to the idea of Bitcoin versus, you know, the American government or the Western European nations? Why is it that the Swiss government is so open to this idea of potentially Bitcoin being a currency?
Okay, so of course I don't know all the secrets, right? These are just my interpretations, but Switzerland is a very old country. It's got a very unique level of democracy. It's neutral. It has been neutral like since forever. So, in general, the Swiss policies, they go very very slowly. Like whatever happens in some places, let's say Malta or Singapore, they want to, you know, they want to be the first one to do this and that, and they're very ambitious and they're very aggressive in the way they do it. Switzerland is more like, you know, the old guy in the mountain who says, I want stability, I want everything to work the way it works. But at the same time, they're very into rules. Like it's a very, you know, strictly regulated place. So I think one of the thing with something like Bitcoin, and also like when the ICO craze started and everything, I think the idea was to say we don't want necessarily to become the leader in the world about, you know, this particular topic. We don't necessarily want to uh, impose our rules on other countries, like let's say the US would be doing traditionally. But we want that if things happen, they happen and they're very regulated and they're very organized and we know what's happening, and it's not just going to go like, you know, all over the place and then people will be crying and it will be chaos. So one of the things that they started doing very early, they had to decide. That's the idea. Instead of waiting for very long until everything collapses, or being ambitious and reckless, they're just saying, well, let's make some decision that is very simple, very clear, and then from there we can start building. It's a little bit, in a way, similar to Bitcoin, where people are saying Bitcoin is boring because it's not as exciting, you know, it's not doing DeFi and whatever. But the idea is, you know, the core layer one protocol, you don't want it to be funky and sexy. You want it to be solid. You want it to be something that you can rely on. So Switzerland, one of the things that they started doing, I don't remember when it was, but it was quite early on. They said, we're just going to tax it like if it was a currency or gold, based on its value on the 31st of December. So they check the official rate that, I don't know where they get it, but some kind of average somewhere, and they say if you have one Bitcoin for the year, let's say 2020, the rate for one Bitcoin is whatever. So 31st of December 2020 is going to be what, 300,000 or something like that.
I hope so.
Yeah, so some like more or less. So they're saying, okay, you have one, you just declare in your wealth that you have this. So it's not about how do you call that in English, when you you know, like in the US, when you spend,
Capital
you made a
gains.
profit, capital gains. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like this is so like backward. It's so difficult to use. What if you're trading? What if you're spending to buy stuff? It's completely like it makes no sense. It's applying some rules for stock that, or for, you know, like art pieces or real estate, on something that is very volatile and very fungible, and that you actually want to use for all kinds of practical uses. So in Switzerland, what they started by saying was, we're just going to say, if you have it, it's like your wealth. Like if you have $1 million, we're going to tax you on that. If you have $1 million worth of, I don't know, art or real estate, we're going to tax you on that. If you have $1 million worth of Bitcoin, we're going to tax you on that. And that actually made a lot of people be not reactive or reactionary, and just go with the flow, which is really good for startups and companies that would, for example, in the case of ICOs, would receive crypto as a payment, because it's really easy for your accountant. At the end of the year, you just check how much you have. That's it. You check how much got in, you check how much is still left, and you pay your taxes. This is something that is very Swiss in the state of mind, I think.
Absolutely. And I think that I'm more nefarious in my thinking. I think that the rules and regulations apply to Bitcoin, especially from a country like the United States, because of its status as the global reserve currency.
Of
Um,
course.
I think that they're using that more as a form of control, more than anything. And it just, I don't think that they're comfortable with this idea of people basically being able to be their own bank, because that's exactly what Bitcoin gives you the power to do, right? Like you are the
Of
CEO of
course,
your
of
own
course.
bank.
I think the difference between, let's say, the US and Switzerland, because it's really on two sides of the spectrum, is, let's say there is an alien coming. Um, the US would put the alien in a cage that is inside another cage that is inside another cage, just in case. Switzerland is saying, innocent until proven guilty. Let's communicate. Let's find out. But if there is anything, we'll put you in a cage. And I think that's the difference. I think the U.S. is not necessarily, or France. France is also a very interesting example, because they're learning, and as they're learning, they're trying to become very involved, but at the same time, they're so scared of it. And but they're so scared that they don't want to see how it works. They're so scared that they lock the key. They throw away the key and that's it, and it's stuck in a cage and nothing can happen. So for companies and for investors, it's really, really difficult.
Absolutely. And I think that you put it very, very beautifully. And I think that whether a government approves this or sanctions this or not, I think that the adoption of Bitcoin, I mean, like people saving and people having an understanding that it's capped at 21 million, I think that is inevitable, man. I think whether, the US approves or France is approved. So it's like these governments, like they better jump on board, because if they don't jump on board, they're just going to get left behind, because I think that it's an inevitable thing, man, because of how open it is, and a good example of that, and I want to get your opinion on this, is how Bitcoin is being adopted in countries with a volatile currency versus countries like Western countries that have a relatively stable currency. And Western countries, it's being seen as an investment, but in more third world countries where the currency is very volatile, it's being seen as as a way to escape inflation. So I'm going to maintain my wealth, right? So I want to get your opinion on that, because it's so different how people view it.
I think we're very comfortable. I mean, especially with the Swiss franc and everything. Like I'm even more comfortable than an American. But I think we're very comfortable. We forget that uh, the system in which we live 50 years ago, most of it didn't exist. 100 years ago, like 90% of it didn't exist. There was a time when, for example, if you wanted to go to the US, you would arrive on Ellis Island. They would, ask your name. They would stamp you. They would check if you had, you know, uh, any kind of, I can't see myself. I can't see myself anymore.
Yeah, your
Can you
camera went
see me?
off.
Ah, yeah, 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 yeah.
There we go.
Thank you. So you would just arrive in the US and you would say, hello, I would like to live here. And of course, it wasn't easy, right? But it was a time when people could move. Nowadays, the whole system that we have with visas and passports and everything. If you want to go, let's say you're a poet and you want to go to Paris, depending on where, I mean, more than 50% of the world, you can't even get there. There was a time when, like you would be in a cafe and you would meet that, I don't know, Indian guy and that whatever South American woman, and she would be a painter, and the guy would be like a sculptor, and there would be some kind of evolution, and it would be quite fantastic. Nowadays, we live in a world where everything is very, very rigid, and we think this is how it is. We think it has always been like this, but it's very, very, very recent. I forgot your question now, but
No, I love these sidetracks. So do you think that Bitcoin is going to make the world more of how it was for 20,000 years, right? Which is this top.
yeah, exactly. Sorry, now I'm back on track. So that's the thing. We are living in that world, but let's say, in Venezuela, they don't really care about what currency they're using. What they want is, I mean, they're more down to earth because they are not at the level where they're so bored and, like first world problems, right? I have an iPhone 11 and my screen is a little bit scratched, and so I need to wait until there is the iPhone 12, and I'm so upset because, why is the world so unfair? They don't have that. So they are more down to earth. They are more like we used to be before we got so spoiled that we are now in a point that we can't even think anymore. I mean, this is the whole, if we want to segue all over the place, this is the whole debate about confinement versus non-confinement and mask versus non-mask. People are so upset with the mask, they forget that it's something that is, it's good for you. Like if someone has a cold or the flu or whatever disease that you can get by coughing, you wear a mask and you're kind of safe, and it's very nice, and you wash your hands. It's super basic. In Asia, a lot of people are not touching like we do because, culturally, they just don't kiss all the time. They don't hug that much, and they don't shake hands. And when they have a cold, they wear a mask. Or if there are lots of people having a cold, they wear a mask. Nobody's upset. It's really fine. But now we're in, let's say, Western Europe and the US and Australia. People are so upset about suddenly the government telling them what to do that they are going like one step further, and they're saying, I want to get sick, whatever the disease, I want to get it. It's completely ridiculous. And this is where it goes back to common sense. Like people in Venezuela, they have more, I'm using that example, but it's like all over the place apparently. In Africa, a lot of countries now are apparently, I saw a tweet earlier, the peer-to-peer is exploding. A lot of people are just down to earth. They have common sense that we lost. And I think one of the really interesting things that I saw with Bitcoin recently was people saying, I just started saving again. I'm actually having, what's his name? Pierre Rochard, who was saying, who cares about confinement and going to have a haircut, Francis Pouillot was saying, I need to have like an illegal haircut. And Pierre Rochard said, you should not have a haircut. You should save money and buy some sats. And people started discussing about frugality and, going back to more traditional values where if you don't need to spend money, just save it. But we got so far away from that. We got so disconnected because we live in a world where you just, you get whatever you want, however you want it, super cheap. And
it's super crazy. And I just wanted to add to that. It's crazy that in order for you to save money, which is, I feel like why it got so unpopular, right? Is because it's crazy that in order for you to save money, you had to buy stocks, or you had to buy real estate, which is very expensive, or you had to buy gold.
Or buy gold. Yeah.
And gold is good, but gold is bad in the sense that if you want to save a lot of money, gold isn't very good. gold is very fucking heavy, right? And if you want to sell that gold, it's difficult as well, right? Because you have to
And
transport it.
it's not that easy either, because if you want to buy gold, you don't want to buy jewelry, because jewelry is more expensive than the price of gold
Absolutely.
of its weight, right? So you actually need to go somewhere and say, I want to buy gold, and they say come back in 24 hours.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's absurd. And I remember listening to, I think it was from the Tales from the Crypt podcast, and he was interviewing some. I don't want to mess up his name, but he was interviewing a Bitcoiner, and he was basically describing of how his family wanted to move from India to United Kingdom, and his dad sold all their wealth into gold, and then the experience of getting on an airplane, passing through customs with all their family's wealth in gold, and all the questions they ask you today, you know,
Yeah.
because they think automatically you're a drug trafficker, you're a terrorist if you have over $10,000. But now you have Bitcoin, and it completely changes the game, because now you can't enforce that. How do you enforce that, right? Because all of us,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
you don't want to carry a hardware wallet, right? You just carry words, you know, you write them down in a book, in a page of a 300-page book. How the fuck do you enforce that as a government? I don't think you can, in my opinion. So it just kind of opens the floodgates.
Yeah, it goes to um, the very old fashioned way of saying that your wealth is your wealth. It doesn't need to be attached to something physical. And this is also something that in 2011, for example, I didn't really understand yet. At first, you're thinking it's really cool because the blockchain, and it's really cool because it's instantaneous, and there is this whole network, and you start. I started in my head. I was equating it with BitTorrent, where you have something and other people have that something, except in the case of Bitcoin, when you get one, the other people don't have it anymore, right? And then you start getting into the concept that you never had it in the first place. What you have is access to it, and you start applying, let's say, BitTorrent, the BitTorrent analogy to Gmail, where you're thinking, okay, but it's somewhere else. And then you start having, your thing is like everything, like it's streamable money, basically. You don't download it, you don't carry it. What you carry with you is access to it. This is really, really interesting, because in a way it's like fiat. If you want, if you want to get burnt by everybody, you're saying it's like fiat, as in like the really deeper meaning of fiat, as in it's a convention. It's you agree that you have this because the network agrees that you have this, but instead of being fiat from a very small group of people who are in control of the money, it's fiat from your peers.
And
And
it's crazy. I just wanted to add to that, to like kind of expand on the conversation so you could dive more deeper into this subject, which is, it's crazy how people have been conditioned today to accept this fiat system, and they think that it's been like this their entire lives. And
yeah, yeah,
I just want to name a stat, which is when they passed this law of you could only like if you carry more than $10,000, it's whatever. So when they passed that law, which was like in the 1970s, $10,000 was equivalent to like $50,000 today,
yeah.
right? So the number hasn't
Didn't
changed,
change. Yeah, yeah.
but the value is significant. So back then, they're like $50,000. People are like, oh, I don't care. Imagine what $10,000 is going to be like 20 years from now. That's going to
Well,
be
the way it's going now, it's going to be pretty crazy.
it's going to be crazy. So people, like, it's not fiat is I would say it's a government form of control. It's really bad. And then once you get orange pilled, like for example myself, and I know that a lot of other Bitcoiners do this, it's like you just keep your wealth in Bitcoin completely, and people look at you like you're fucking crazy. They look at you like you're insane. What are you doing? And I'm like, dude, I know that money's mine. I know that Bitcoin is mine. I know it's mine. I know that I own it. I know the bank isn't going behind my back and lending it out to other people and doing all this bullshit, I know that that money belongs to me, right? And you can't say that with anything else unless you have a bar of gold that's sitting under your bed, right?
What is fun is not so long ago people were saying, it's still risky. It's still, it's still an experiment. And now it seems people are saying, we know it's an experiment, but at the end of the day, it might be the least risky of all. If you just keep your dollars, it's also an experiment at this stage. I mean, the whole, machine printing machine goes brr. It's so ridiculous that we have no idea what's going to happen in 1 year or in 5 years or in 50 years. Like, there will be consequences. But what is really interesting is that when people, like when there was Bretton Woods, I don't know, like decision at court, whatever it's called, the Bretton Woods convention, people were not saying this is an experiment. They were saying this is the world. This is where we're going now. And people like you and me, at the time, I don't know, you seem very young, so I guess you were not born, but even if we were adults, so wait, because now my computer decided to fall asleep. So sorry, you're gonna have to edit that as well. So with Bretton Woods, even if we were adults and educated and even working in finance, we would have no idea where we're going. We would just go, it's the government. They know what they're doing. Back in the days, mainstream media was like even more like, it was really the voice of the government, and it was happening somewhere and the whole world was there. And what are you going to do? Basically, you just think
they trusted the government back then.
Yeah. I mean,
in general,
you just think
the government.
This is the evolution. This is where we should be going because it just makes sense. And when you think about it today, it's so incredible that we are taking it completely for granted. We're talking about Bitcoin saying, well, it's an experiment, when the current experiment is basically failing and everybody can see it and nobody's saying anything. I mean, people who are saying something are, conspiracy theorists, basically.
Exactly. Or they're Bitcoiners.
Or the Bitcoiners.
So I think that's so important. And I just want to add into the topic because it's the topic of time, right? Time framing. Because as Bitcoiners, we see things, right, and I think that it adds to a lot of anxiety to a lot of Bitcoiners. Where it's like you get in and you're like, okay, I have the world's best money, why isn't the dollar going to zero? I think that it's inevitable that the dollar goes to zero, but you have to understand that this takes decades. It's going to take 10, 15, 20, 30, maybe 50 if they pull something out of their ass. I don't know, but you can't be thinking in years. You have to be thinking in decades, because if you look at time, like the Bretton Woods agreement, right, where they agreed, I think that was in the 50s or 40s, right? And then all the way to 1970, right? That's a 30-year span where in the 40s, they're like, okay, backed by gold, everything's safe. We have a safe, kosher. You don't have to worry about jack shit. This is good. And then the 70s, Nixon is like, yeah, let's just take, that doesn't matter. We could just print, so that evolution. And remember what happens during that time. I have a buddy of mine that works at Goldman Sachs, and he still doesn't like Bitcoin. I'm like, dude, are you crazy? He's like, man, I don't get it. It's not backed by anything. I'm like, bro, like, what is a dollar backed by? He's like, it's the government. I'm like, okay, hold on, buddy. You've worked for Goldman for how many years? For 10, right? No, for what? For 6? And you think you know everything about how history is going to turn out? I think that's naive. I think that there's something here that is revolutionary.
Yes. I don't know what else to say, because obviously we're on the same side, but what is really revolutionary is, my opinion, but this is really personal. I don't think the dollar will go to zero. I don't think it's the end of, the American control over the world for a while. But what I think is it will have to move forwards faster and faster and faster and faster. They will need to control it more. They will need to, impose some weird regulations that don't make sense, just to keep something alive. It's like uh, that I don't know, like someone in a hospital bed, and you just keep adding medicine and you just keep adding medical equipment, but at the end, that it's inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the dollar at this stage, just by Russia saying, we're just going to mess with you until you give up. China saying we're going to mess with you until you give up. The euro that is not collapsing as fast as people would think it should. If you look at all this and you look at the geopolitical climate in which it just makes sense that now, everybody hates everybody. Nobody believes anything. If you see something in any newspaper or any media, you doubt it, whatever side you're on. Trump is going to be reelected. That is, if he's not, pulling some kind of weird emergency state where he needs to postpone the elections for the next 20 years or whatever. But like nothing makes any sense because we're just like trying to keep something happening that is falling apart.
Absolutely, trying to keep that old system alive.
But they will
dying.
keep it alive. That's where it's so disgusting. It will stay alive for a very long time, I think. But it's gonna become so unstable and so weird and so unreal and unnatural. But like a ghost, basically.
Absolutely.
And
It's the analogy that you said about the person at the hospital, that they just keep
yeah,
adding machines and medicines where it's like it's like artificially extending their lives,
yeah.
which that if it was up to nature, that person would have died a long time ago. So yeah, I totally agree. I think that things are just going to get even more crazy. I think that the government is going to regulate even more. And there is this very interesting like psychological phenomenon, which is like if you change things to a human being too quickly, they react badly. So they say, no, fuck that. I'm not going to agree to this. But if you start over time, over a period of like 10, 15, 20, 30 years, start changing things methodically and slowly, in the beginning, you're like, oh, this is just a small change. But over time, it's like exponential growth. And within 10 years, if you look at how things were a decade before, the changes were very radical, right? Like, and a great example of that is this idea of, money laundering anything over 10,000. At that time, no
Yeah.
one complained because it was a $50,000 limit. But now we're like, yo, 10,000 is a little. Like, why did we ever agree to that? So I agree with you completely, man. I think
and
that's
and
so
it
spot
and
on.
it cuts both ways, because one of the very unique advantage that can never be replicated of Bitcoin is that it started 11 years ago. The whole concept of let's start something completely stealth under the radar just for us, and we see what happens, and we're a bunch of geeks and we're just having fun kind of thing.
Mhm.
It can only happen with something that is completely new. And everything that is a replication of Bitcoin, maybe Ethereum can pull it off somehow, because they started quite early enough and now they have like a real momentum. It's really something that I don't know how to say, but it has enough resilience for any kind of attack.
So
I still think it's a shitcoin and it's a pre-mined scam, but in terms of the future, they have enough footprint to
Mhm.
be able to do stuff. But anyone who has a good idea today, and you can see that even with, like, sometimes you can be curious and you say, well, this is a shitcoin, but they have a good idea, whatever it is. I'm not going to name names, but you're thinking, that might be a good idea. And you think, yeah, but they will never be able to pull it off because everybody is looking at it. Everybody is going to try to attack it. because the only way for nobody to attack it is to pre-mine like crazy and to have the founders keep a lot. So even if they're like with really good intent, they have to behave like they're scammers. So whatever happens, they will be treated like scammers because there is no way out anymore. And this is where like the whole Satoshi, I don't know, experiment to me is incredible, because it was the following of the cypherpunks. It was happening exactly as the internet was really, becoming kind of a commodity that everybody has, that is just like very normal, that everybody has on their phone. Everybody has, like 3G, 4G. I don't remember the chronology, but it was becoming something that was very standardized. And at the same time that it was standardized, people were saying, oh, you have to renew your passport. We're going to get the, biometric this and that. We're going to get your fingerprints. We're going to get this and that, because, 911. So nowadays you can't just travel the way you used to and everything. And it's really like two storylines side by side that just happen exactly at the same moment. And the coincidence is just like unbelievable.
It's crazy, and it just the virgin birth, right? Which is what the term that I like to say. It's the virgin birth will never be replicated, right?
It's
Because
impossible. It's impossible.
now people see a coin and they tie financial value to it. When Bitcoin
Yeah.
was born, and you said, and I love the stories of the OG. I'm calling you an OG, man, because you were around for the faucet, right?
Yeah.
I hear stories of the faucet, but I was too young, so I didn't care about that shit back then. So imagine that, guys, like 5 Bitcoin given away in a faucet, right? That's like $50,000 today, a little bit more, right? So it's
Yeah, and at the time you were like, but I don't have an address. Oh, I'll do it another time. What
and
do I care?
because
I
it
don't
had
even
no
know where to
value.
get an address.
But that's what was able to give
Of
Bitcoin this
course,
virgin birth, right?
of
This,
course.
like, where it wasn't fucked with. And then as soon as that pizza transaction happened, all of a sudden this token or whatever, this trinket that you were using on the internet that everyone was like playing around with, all of a sudden it had monetary value, right? And then we all know the story from there. And Yves, I want to touch on a really cool project that you're working on. Let me pull up this website because I love this type of shit. I'm a sucker for this type of shit, so definitely want to talk to you about it. So
Ah,
this is
that's
Stat
fine.
Pile. It's also open source. You guys can go check it out. It's on GitHub. It's an Apple app. So because usually things are developed for Android. So it's an Apple app that it's an address tracker. That's all it is. And it's really cool because if you look to the things, it could connect to your own node, right? So
Not yet, not yet, not yet.
not yet, but you are working on it,
We're
right?
working on it. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool. So
So
I would rather use this than, for example, Blue Wallet is cool because it does have that functionality,
mhm.
but it's more of a wallet, right? And I don't want
That's
a
the
wallet.
thing. That's the thing. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I want to use Blue Wallet as a wallet, but I don't want to have at the same time in my day-to-day wallet access to, let's say, my Trezor where I have 25 billion worth of whatever. So the only way for something like that to work for me was what Samurai did. They have the Samurai wallet on the one hand, and they have Sentinel on the other hand. They're completely separate. They're two different things, and one is really just for checking things. What we wanted to do was to have something that is very basic, so that we can keep growing. And so what needed to happen first, of course, was that it would support all kind of addresses, because you need to use the API of the Explorer that will be working, with SegWit and everything, because they don't all do it. But what we wanted was that you can choose your Explorer. So now we have two. We use mempool. I forgot the name. Mempool space. Um, and the second one is blockstream.info.
Okay.
These are what power the APIs. And then from there, you can verify within the browser, you can verify any address double check on, I don't know how many, like 8 or 9 explorers, that you just in one click you can actually have access to it from outside the app. The next step, of course, is the XPub, so that you don't have to put individual addresses. And the next thing is, of course, to use your own node. And if you use your own node, you want to use Tor. So like it just snowballs every time we move forward. We just want to add something new. But what we didn't want to do was to wait until everything was done, because I think it was really lacking on iOS. I like Sentinel on Android, so we don't need to reinvent the wheel. But what we really wanted was that if you are, I don't know, let's say you give a paper wallet to a friend, or you give a not cold card, sorry, open dime, or you have an open dime. You don't want to bookmark things. You don't want to put them on an Excel spreadsheet. You don't want, like, everything is a pain in the ass. What you want is like the equivalent of a bookmark for your navigator. You just want to have a bookmark, and you want everything to be put together, and you want to have the total. And the total should be in sats, because it's the standard, and because, enough is enough. Most people nowadays, all the newcomers, they will never have a Bitcoin. It's just the way it is. All the people who got 5 at the faucet, they gave away probably more than 5, to their friends. So now they have nothing.
And their friends probably,
and their friends,
throw away the private keys to that. So
exactly, they say, "Oh yeah, it's great. I'll just write it on a piece of paper and forget about it."
I love this. I love this because, and this is what I'm going to start using now. I love this for one simple reason: is it's exactly what you said, man. It's the fact that Blue Wallet is a wallet, but this is only an address checker. So if I want to check my multi-sig, pub files or addresses associated to that, all I have to do is just plug it into this, and then and then that watches my addresses for me, and then it adds all the balances, and that gives me, okay, this is my balance for this wallet, right? So I think that's so important, and I completely agree with what you're saying, that iOS is just lacking. Everyone's just fans with Android, but I'm a big Apple fan. Just because, look, I don't care what you say. You can say, look, PC is better, Linux is better, and you can say all that. I have those things, okay? I have a PC. I have a fucking Linux machine that I have on my PC. But let me tell you, my everyday laptop is a Mac. And can I tell you why? Because it's fucking easy to use, okay? So anyone,
it's comfortable.
Is like, go, dude, like, you're fucking lying. Mac is just easier to use. You can say whatever you want about how their culture and then whatever. And, like, it's a closed garden, all that shit. I don't care. It's easy to use, and that's what I care about. So this is really cool, man. I love it. I just downloaded it. And, man, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And, we are called the Crypto Creamers, even though we're a Bitcoin only podcast. But
well, yeah, you have to start rebranding, like I don't know, Bitcoin Fudge or something.
So I like the name because it Trojan horses a lot of people from shitcoins, because they're like, okay, Crypto Creamers, okay, cool, and then I only talk about Bitcoin stuff, but I don't say I only talk about Bitcoin stuff. It's just I only have Bitcoin people. So, they kind of get
stealthy
to that community. But I've had so many conversations with people. It's like, why do you call it the Crypto Creamer? Man, it's a good name. I don't know what to tell you. It's like cryptocloaks. Why are you called cryptocloaks if you do only Bitcoin? One of our most traditional question for our show is basically, what is your favorite ice cream flavor, Mr. Honey Badger creator?
Well, I'm super, super boring. What I like is Fior di Latte.
That doesn't sound boring at all, man. Well,
it's the most basic. There is not even vanilla in it. What I like with it is that you can't cheat. If the ice cream maker makes a good Fior di Latte, it's gonna be fantastic.
And what is the flavor? What's the flavor? What does it taste like?
Well, it tastes like frozen milk.
Okay, but that sounds delicious.
Okay, I never had it good or almost not at all outside of Italy. So probably Giacomo can relate. Probably, most people can't. But
So
I think what I want is the ice cream basic. I want the layer one protocol of ice cream. Then after
okay.
that, you can do whatever you want with your fancy flavors.
Yeah, so I like if I didn't live in Europe and you described this to me, if I only lived in America, I would say that's disgusting. But I've lived in Switzerland, so I understand what you mean that milk could actually taste good, right? I understand.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
So, man, I'm sure it's a very delicious flavor. But guys, thank you so much for checking another episode of the Crypto Creamers. If you guys want to check out more of Yves' stuff, I'm going to put it down in the description. Definitely download the Sappiler. And if you guys want to, create your own merchandise or whatever, stickers you want to spread around the message with the legendary Honey Badger, it's also going to be on his GitHub, which I'm also going to link down in the description. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.